started. 704, 705 in the 11th edition, 882 in the 10th edition. This is John Donne's Valediction Forbidding Mourning. We start with, I don't do this about every poet. I do it about Donne. My dissertation was on Donne. I've studied a lot of Donne. It's kind of interesting. A little bit of background. Donne was born to a Catholic family at a time when it was illegal, essentially, to be Catholics. Okay, he had a brother and several relatives who were imprisoned and or killed by the state for being Catholic. 704 in the 11th edition and 882, I think, in the 10th edition. Maybe it's not. Couple other things. In 1601, Donne married a woman named Anne Moore. Okay? Let me back up a little bit. In the late 1590s, 1596, 1597, can't remember the exact year, Donne went to work as the personal secretary to a man named Thomas Egerton. Okay? Egerton had the position in England as the keeper of the seal. This is it's big. This is the Great Seal of England, all right? Whenever the king or queen, at that point Queen Elizabeth, whenever the queen would issue a royal proclamation, a royal document, there would be a big old hunk of wax put down on that document, warm, and then the seal would be pressed upon it. That indicated this is an official royal document. Thomas Egerton was the one who was responsible for maintaining, keeping possession of that seal. Donne went to work for him as his personal secretary. Not secretary like we think of today. The secretary was the person who handled not only all your appointments and things like that, but handled all of your correspondence. Everything that you had written was written by this individual, as well as handling all of your public relations, what we consider public relations. They didn't really have public relations back then, other than the secretary would write poems and such for the important persons, friends, family, acquaintances, and people that individual was trying to flatter or butter up, okay? So Donne gets this position to this very powerful individual. Egerton was like the third most powerful person in England. Okay? Queen being first, Lord Chamberlain kind of being next, and then the keeper of the seal. Donne went to work for him. Prior to this, Donne had served, I think it was prior, Donne had served as a member of Parliament when he was in his early 20s. Elected member of Parliament, all right? He was widely known in the 1590s, early 1600s, as an intellectual and as a writer. His poems were circulated widely. A lot of other writers referred to Donne at the time, okay? Refer to him in their letters, refer to him in their poems. We're going to see a poem, I think, no, we're not. I'm confusing this with another class. By Ben Jonson, a contemporary of his, a playwright of his. He probably knew Shakespeare and hung out with him at times in London, etc., okay? So, around 1596, 1597, he goes to work for Thomas Egerton. Donne at that time he's born in 72, so 24, 25, I think he's 24. And he meets Anne Moore, okay, who is Egerton's niece. She's living with her uncle, or at her uncle's house, okay? Her father is a man named Thomas More, not the Saint Thomas More, who wrote Utopia and and disagreed with Henry VIII about getting a divorce from the Catholic Church and was beheaded and all that kind of stuff. This further down the line. She's related to that Thomas More. So Donne meets her, I think it's 1596, when he is 24 and she, I believe, is 13. Okay? And they fall in love. Okay, again, Ashton's got this look on like, something's wrong with this picture. He's 24, she's 13. They get married 4 years later when she's all of 17. All right? They secretly get married. Let me put it that way. Secretly get married. So Donne is now 28, 27 or 28. She's now 17. And their marriage stays secret for about 3 months. And then their marriage is outed. Not exactly sure how. One of Donne's poems is about a couple who secretly marry and is about, you know, keep the secret from your father and from your uncle and such, and then, you know, don't let it get out. Well, when it is discovered, two things happen immediately. One, Donne is fired, so he now no longer has gainful employment. And two, her father has him imprisoned. I mean, literally thrown in jail for about 3 months. And we have letters written by Donne to Sir Thomas More, and reverse letters from Thomas More to Donne that begin during this period when he's in jail and go up to, I don't remember when they stop. They go on for at least 10 years, I think, or so. They're all in the Folger Shakespeare Library in Washington, D.C. Okay? After 3 months, he gets out, but he can't find a job. See, when Donne was working for Thomas Egerton, he was on the fast track to big success. Like I said, he'd already been a member of Parliament. People thought this guy, you know, all the doors are opening for him. Everything lies at his feet. He can do whatever he wants. All right? 1603, King James becomes King of England. James VI of Scotland becomes James I of England. And he likes what Donne has written up until this point. He's heard about Donne. He actually interviews Donne. He wants Donne to become Anglican. He wants Donne to become an Anglican priest because he wants Donne to be his personal priest. And what that means is every time a door starts to slightly open for Donne, James has it slammed shut. He can't get gainful employment. So he goes to work as a secretary for somebody else, a guy named Robert Drury, okay, who's just a nobleman, but he's not, you know, all that high ranking and stuff. And so he does the kinds of things for Robert Drury that he did for Thomas Egerton. All right. By the way, they marry in 1600, 1601. Somewhere around there. She dies in 1617 at the ripe old age, I believe, of 31. Between this and 1617, she has 12 children, 5 of whom either die in infancy or are stillborn. All right? Hard life. This poem is written in 1611. Okay? It's not published at that time. Hardly any of Donne's poems were ever published during his lifetime. Only 3, if memory serves correctly. They were all circulated like your notebooks. People would copy and pass around his poems and such. Okay? Donne's very first biographer, a guy named Isaac Walton, who knew Donne personally, was a friend of his, tells us kind of a backstory to this poem. And the backstory is that Anne, his wife, okay, was pregnant. And Donne had to take a journey to the continent with his employer, Sir Robert Drury, to work for him. She didn't want him to go. She really didn't want him to go because she had a premonition. And the premonition was, while you are gone, something is going to happen to the baby that she was carrying at the time. Turned out to be true. While he was on the continent, she delivered a stillborn child. Okay? So, that's the backstory to this poem. Now, one comment. Unless the poet or a poet makes clear that the matter of the poem is autobiographical, never read a poem as autobiographical. Don't assume the speaker here is John Donne, even though we do have that biographical story behind it. Always assume that the speaker or persona of a poem is something created by the poet, is a fictitious person, all right? Always, 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 unless the poet makes clear that it's not. So, a valediction forbidding mourning. What's a valediction? Why do high schools have valedictorians? When I was in school, we had one valedictorian. When my eldest child graduated, Blackman High School, I want to say they had 20. 20 valedictorians. Why? Because they were all 4.0 students. They were all, popular. They'd done all the extracurricular stuff, saved puppies and helped old ladies and the whole 9 yards kind of thing, okay? The reason they had 20 is because the principal didn't want to say, you're it. Because then the principal would have 19 sets of parents going, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. So what does a valedictorian do? How many of you graduated high school? Did you not go to your graduations? What did you have to sit through and listen to? Speech. Or, case of my daughter, literally, there were 20 speeches by students graduating. Plus the interminable video, whatever. A valediction is a goodbye. Vale means goodbye, okay? Diction, saying. Sayonara, that's it. That's what it is, okay? Donne wrote 3 of these. No, it's not 3. 3 of these. Donne wrote 3 of these. This one is a goodbye saying forbidding mourning. Remember, always when you read a poem, look at the title because the title gives you an indication of what it's about. And not only a poem, any work of literature. Barn burning tells you what? There's going to be barns burning somewhere in that short story. Okay? So this one, Don't Mourn. It's written in 1611. It's important that you know that date because something happened in 1610, okay, that makes some of what's talked about in here make sense. We're not going to get through all the poems for today that are assigned, by the way. We're not even going to get a third of the way. As virtuous men pass mildly away and whisper to their souls to go, while some of their sad friends do say, the breath goes now, and some say, no. So let us melt and make no noise, no tear floods nor sigh tempests move, to profanation of our joys to tell the laity our love. Okay, we're going to stop there for a minute. By the way, move and love rhymed in Donne's day. Okay? So, how do virtuous men die? As virtuous men pass mildly away, quietly. They don't go kicking and screaming. They don't go railing with their last breaths. F you, God, kind of thing. In fact, they go so quietly and silently that some of their sad friends say, the breath goes now, and some say, no. People sitting around the deathbed, they're like, is he dead? Is he still alive? I don't know. I don't hear anything. So, notice that begins as, so let us melt. The opening 2 quatrains are a simile. Okay? Just as those virtuous men pass Go on to the great beyond, completely silently. So let us melt. Let us dissolve and make no noise, no tear floods nor side tempests move. Those tear floods and side tempests didn't point this out to my first class. Come from an Italian poet named Petrarch. For some reason, my brain is not, well, it's working even worse than usual. 14th century, 13th century, 13th century. I'm almost positive. Petrarch was the one who invented what's called the sonnet. Sonnet just means a little love song. Okay? Sonnets have, I'll talk about sonnet structure in a moment. In creating these sonnets that Petrarch wrote about a woman that he loved. He was already married, had children. He loved her from a distance. Okay? It's like he looked at her and was like, wow. And he falls in love with her. Her name is Laura, L-A-U-R-A. Okay? And he creates a style of poetry about talking about the beloved that then becomes conventional. That is, everybody after him uses the same images and tropes, etc. So, for example, if a man falls in love with a woman and she doesn't reciprocate his love, he just sighs an awful lot. And those sighs become like hurricanes. They destroy the world. Or he has tears, and his tears become floods that flood the world, etc. And if she looks at him, it's like a ray of golden sunlight. And if she smiles at him, he's lifted up into the seventh heaven, and all this kind of stuff. All right? So, Donne uses two Petrarchan conventions there. The tear floods and the side tempests. The basis for those goes back to Petrarch. Then he says, "'Twere profanation of our joys to tell the laity our love." Two religious terms. Profanation, to make profane, okay, and laity. Let's look at the second one first. What is the laity? If you go to church, you have two kinds of individuals at the church. And this applies whether you're talking about the Christian church or a Jewish synagogue or a mosque. Okay? You got two different classes of individuals. All right? You got the people out there in the pews or on the prayer mats, okay, in a mosque. And then you have what? The people standing up here. In a Christian church, standing behind a pulpit, often, okay? Or reading from the Torah or reading from the Quran, okay? What are the two classes? Those out there are the laity, okay? They're the followers, so to speak. Those up here are the clergy. They're the ones who are the initiates into the secrets, and they're the ones who can perform the rites and rituals, blah, 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 right? So, he says it would be a profanation of our joys. It would make profane our joys. The implication is that their joys are somehow, what's the opposite of profane? Sacred. Our joys are sacred. Sacred implies relation to God, okay? That God has made something good. So our joys are somehow related to God in that sense. It would be a profanation of our joys to tell the laity our love. It would make profane, it would lessen to tell those people out there about our love. Tell how? So-and-so is leaving. That's one way how. How else? simply by making a lot of noise when they separate. Not marriage separation when I go on my trip, like at the point of departure. Let's assume for the moment the backstory is true, in that Ann Dunn did not want her husband to travel. But she goes with him to the point of departure. She watches him walk down the dock, get on a boat, and he leaves. He's saying, don't at that point start wailing and weeping and sighing and crying. Okay? Next stanza. Moving of the earth brings harms and fears. Men reckon what it did and meant. But trepidation of the spheres, though greater far, is innocent. What's moving of the earth? We don't have them very often in Tennessee, but we do have them. Yeah. Just wait till the new Madrid Fault rips. Last time it ripped, anybody know what it did? It created the land between the lakes, because that was one lake. What else did it do? Made the Mississippi River reverse flow for a few days. You know, it flows from north to south. It went the other direction for a couple. It was the largest known earthquake in United States history. I'm from California. I'm just south of the Bay Area, okay, of San Francisco. 1906 earthquake, pretty damn big earthquake. 8.3 is what it was estimated at. It just demolished San Francisco. The earthquakes we've had in LA since then, LA, not San Francisco, haven't even been close. The one that took out the nuclear plant in Japan, I think was a 9.1. That's like 100 times larger, okay? So moving of the earth brings harms and fears. They didn't understand plate tectonics. They had no idea what caused them. And men reckon what it did and meant. And even in our 21st, almost in 22nd, in our 21st century understanding of plate tectonics, when there is a massive earthquake somewhere, you still will see reporters, journalists, thinkers say, where is God? I mean, all you people who believe in God, how can there be a good God if these things occur, okay? So, people wonder, how did it happen and what does it mean? But trepidation of the spheres, trepidation means movement. It doesn't mean fear. Trepidation of the spheres, though greater far, is innocent. And so we have to back up or stop for a moment. What does he mean, trepidation of the spheres? What spheres? In the old conception of the universe, okay? This is from 2nd century BC, I believe. A Greek guy named Ptolemy, P-T-O-L-E-M-Y, and his version of the universe is called the Ptolemaic universe, right? He said the universe is composed of 9 spheres. You have the earth at the center, and the sphere immediately around the earth is the orbit of the moon, and then outside that you have 8 other spheres. One of those is the sphere of the fixed stars. One of them is the sphere, if I remember correctly, of Venus. One is the sphere of the sun, because he thought the sun revolved around the earth. Why? We still use the language. We still use the language of this old view. Because what do we say the sun does in the morning? It rises. What does that imply? We are standing still, and it's the sun moving. It's not what happens. It's we are moving. The earth is revolving. They didn't realize the earth revolved. They thought the sun, the day and the night, literally from the sun moving around us, okay? And you have all these spheres, and all the way out here is the Empyrean, okay? That's where, if one believed in God, that's where God lived. It's also called the primum mobile from Aristotle, prime mover. God moves everything. Even though Aristotle was before Ptolemy. Ptolemy's the one who kind of really codifies, sets down in clear language how all this stuff works, all right? So that's the old geocentric version of the universe. Geo, Earth, is at the center. Everything else revolves around us. Guess what that makes us? Where are we on the animal chain? We're at the top. It's like when I put my cats out every day, or my cats need something, I say, and that's why you're at the lower end of the food chain, you know, because we're the smartest, blah, 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 all right? This is the whole basis of astrology. What do you do when you read your horoscope? You're finding out what your day is going to be like, what your week's going to be like. What's it all based on? The movement of the stars and the planets and how they influence your life, all right? Movement of the spheres, though greater far, is innocent, Dunn says. That is, the movement of those spheres out there is innocent. It doesn't affect us. Why? This is why the date of the poem is important. He's writing this in 1611. Because in 1610, Galileo writes his findings that he based upon looking through the telescope he invented, and his findings, because he's interested in Copernicus, 16th century, and Tycho Brahe, another 16th century astronomer, who both suggested the Earth wasn't at the center of the universe. And the Earth didn't, and the sun didn't revolve around the Earth revolved around the sun. Okay? Galileo proved they were correct. It's why the church imprisoned him, by the way. I mean, they literally locked him up and said, take it back or we're going to kill you. And he took it back. He said, oops, I was wrong. If I remember correctly, shortly before he died, he said, no, I wasn't. I was right all along. Okay? Dunn, very interested in science and mathematics and all that kind of stuff, not just languages and literature and art. Dunn read this in Latin. And this is our proof. He has another poem also written about the same time where he talks about, the center cannot hold, meaning the Earth. It doesn't hold everything together. There's another way of looking at the world. This is a huge shift in thinking. I mean, it's hard for us to wrap our minds around it because it seems everyday, ordinary, practical. Can you think of something that could possibly be similar in our understanding, or that would be similar to this kind of discovery? What could be discovered today that would be similar to this? Life in space. Single cell organism. Most people would probably go, it's a bug, a paramecium out there. How about, there's an astronomer at Harvard. I don't have time for this. Why am I wasting? There's an astronomer at Harvard. His name is Avi Loeb. A-V-I, first name, L-O-E-B. He's been arguing for a few years now that we've actually seen our first instance of not just an interstellar traveler, but an interstellar spaceship. About 3 years ago, I think it was, something was seen passing through the solar system, our solar system. But it was only seen or recognized as being seen after the fact, after it had nearly left the solar system. And as it came in, and it slingshotted around the sun, and it's now where we can't even see it. It was only discovered, if I remember right, as it was on its outward trajectory. And then people went and looked back through photographs, because people are photographing space all the time, computers and such, and this thing was discovered. Everybody, all astrophysicists look at this thing and say it's the first thing from that is of interstellar origin that we've ever seen in our solar system. Interstellar meaning it comes from another galaxy, okay, outside the Milky Way. It's huge in and of itself, all right? He argues, and a few other people, not many, it was actually a spaceship. Most people say it's an asteroid. Only problem is it didn't look like and behave like any kind of asteroid we've ever seen. It's big and long, kind of shaped like a cigar. It didn't reflect light like an asteroid should, and he has a variety of other reasons, okay? That would be, you know, about the same. To discover intelligent life out there. Why would that be about the same? What have we discovered so far? I'm old enough to remember when the only known planets in the universe were, showing my age, the nine in our solar system. How many do most astronomers now say there are?
Well,
Can't do that. 8. Because Pluto's no longer a planet. It's a dwarf planet, okay? So, all that is just evidence that Dunn had read this, and all that stuff that's out there doesn't affect us. Back down to the poem, which I'm going to have to go back to the spheres in just a moment. Dull sublunary lovers love, whose soul of sense cannot admit absence, because it doth remove those things which elemented it. Okay? Sublunary lovers. Here's the moon. Moon is called Luna. This is the region between the orbit of the moon and Earth. Everything here is changeable, impermanent. Word that is used often is mutable. All right? So everything beneath the orbit of the moon, there's no stability, there's no permanence. Okay? Dull sublunary lovers love. That is, lovers whose love is kind of determined by the moon. So what does that mean? Their love is what? Changeable, impermanent, mutable. It's not till death do us part. Whose soul is sense, that is, the thing that makes up these people's love is what? Sensory perceptions. Sight, the body, how it looks, how it feels, how it smells, how it tastes. What's the other one? How it smells, okay? Whose soul and sense cannot admit absence. That is, their love can't admit the absence of the beloved. Why? Because absence removes those things which elemented, created it. So what is this love based upon? Entirely. Let me ask this question. And I'm going to assume for the moment that all of you would agree with me. Maybe you don't. That's fine. But just, I'm going on that assumption. What is never the right answer to the question, honey, why do you love me? See a couple of grins. Is it ever your body? It's just it. It's your body. I love your body. I might as well. Hell no. No, it's not. Is it your voice? No. It's what? The correct answer is, I don't know, honey. It's everything about you. That's the right answer. Okay? Because if it's the body, then what can happen? If you can't love the one you want, Elvin, I think it was Elvin Bishop, famously sang in the 1970s, if you can't love the one you want or love, anybody know how the rest of the line goes? Love the one you're with. Ouch, right? If you're in a relationship and your lover's no longer there, find somebody else while he or she is gone. But we, the speaker and the person being addressed, by a love so much refined that ourselves know not what it is. Our love is not determined or governed by the moon. Our love is refined. What's another word for refined? If you refine gold, what do you do to it? You purify it. Our love is purified, that ourselves know not what it is. Honey, why do you love me? I don't know. I don't know what it is about you that. Enter assured of the mind. Enter between assured. They have the same assurance, the same belief of the mind. It's a mental love. Okay? We care less. Eyes, lips, and hands to miss. It doesn't matter to me if I can't touch you or see you or kiss you. Why? Because wherever you are, the speaker is suggesting what? I'm kind of with you up here. Okay? Our two souls, therefore, which are one, though I must go, endure not yet a breach, but an expansion, like gold to airy thinness be. How are there two souls one? Well, he just said, enter assured of the mind. Notice he's kind of equating mind there with the soul. It's not mind, rationality, intellect. Okay? How else are they one? Possibly. Marriage. Okay? Genesis, and then later on Christ repeats it, for this reason, man and woman come together and they become one soul. So, our souls, which are one, though I must go, endure not yet a breach. What's a breach? A break. If I have to leave, that doesn't mean we are separated in our souls. No. Our souls do what? They expand. Like a rubber band. Okay? Like gold to airy thinness beat. Why do they use gold and not lead? Gold and lead are both malleable metals. So why not use lead? How many of you want to have your other compare you to a lump of lead? Heavy and dense. Worth much? Not really. Gold? Oh yeah. Bling, man. Shiny, sparkly, draws attention, wealthy, valuable. Okay? But then, it's almost like the person being addressed in the poem does something. Gives a funny look, maybe says something that we don't hear, like, come on. You're leaving to go to Europe. I'm stuck here in London. What do you mean there is no breach? So the speaker comes up with another image. If they be two, they are two so as stiff twin compasses are two. Thy soul, the fixed foot, makes no show to move, but doth that the other do. Stiff twin compasses. He means, assume for a moment, this is like a compass that you use to scribe a circle. Okay? Connected at the top, right? It's got a little arc thing that the one foot slides along. The other foot does not move within the compass. Okay? So he says, they are two like stiff twin compasses are two. Notice in a compass, the two legs are joined. They're not joined leg to leg. They're joined by something that connects them, right? So he says, thy soul, the fixed foot, makes no show to move, but doth that the other do. Well, if I had an actual compass and I held it up right here, I can move this leg like that, right? If I can hold it correctly. And this leg doesn't move at all. And I can move it, theoretically, depending on the kind of compass, all the way out to 90 degrees. This one wouldn't move at all. That's not the image he's talking about, though. What happens if you've got this foot, let's say the black one is the point, the one that sticks in the paper, and this is the one with the lead or ink. What happens when you move this one, but you're keeping it on the same plane as the fixed foot? The farther out this one moves, the foot, from this one does what? It bends after it. Why? Because both feet are staying on the same plane. All right? So, that's why it makes no show to move, but doth if the other do. If the other foot moves, then this leg has to move after it. And though it, that is the listener's foot, the beloved's foot, if we take Isaac Walton's word for it, Donne's wife, and Donne, and though it in the center sit, yet when the other far doth roam, it leans, right? So if you only move it out an inch, it leans a little bit. If you move it out 6 inches, it moves a lot. And though it in the center sit, yet when the other far doth roam, it leans and hearkens after it. Now, hearken kind of implies, wait, I'm coming. But it doesn't here mean that. It just means it leans after it and grows erect as the other returns home. So the two are back side by side. Such wilt thou, okay, be to me, who must like the other foot obliquely run. Oblique to what? Oblique's an angle, right? Oblique to the fixedness or the fixed foot. I've got to run at an angle to you, that is, away from you. And you will do what? You will hearken after me, that is, you will look towards me, metaphorically, while I'm gone, wondering how he's doing, blah, blah, blah. I mean, every one of you, if you've had a loved one and the person has had to leave for a while, maybe I shouldn't make this assumption. What are your thoughts about when that person is gone? You're thinking about them, right? But you don't think about them once they come back as much. Why? What's the phrase? Absence makes the heart grow fonder. And then when the person comes back, we take them for granted. Such wilt thou be to me, who must like the other foot obliquely run, thy firmness. Notice, she's the anchor. She's the important one. Makes my circle just. What does that mean? Makes my circle just. The circle is a traditional symbol of perfection. Yeah, that's true. Well, if I had an actual compass that would hold these things, I could inscribe a perfect circle because the center point would stay, would not move. But what happens because I don't have a perfect circle? I mean, I could do this 100 times. I can guarantee you, none of them would end up a perfect circle. Notice what happened. Started here, and what do we have? A big gap. The circle isn't perfect. It's not a circle. Why do we wear, for those who do, these things? Is it a nice little gold symbol of the ball and chain, the lead? It's a symbol of eternity. Notice the circle, it doesn't have what? Beginning or end. If it were a square, I was telling my first class, think about it. If you look at your fingers, you could wear squares. They are kind of square shaped, right? But a square has what? 4 lines, angles. Each one of those corners could become the beginning or the end. The circle doesn't have anything like that, okay? And makes me end where I begun. That is, if you don't stay here, I won't what? I won't be drawn back to you. Okay? That's the whole point of his sonnet, or of his poem. Oh, good grief. Okay, 11 minutes left. Next poem, Robert Browning, My Last Duchess, 726, or 910. 726 in the 11th, 910 in the 10th edition. My Last Duchess is a dramatic monologue. It's one of the terms that's in your book, okay? Oh, and let me just throw this out right now since I'm thinking about it. I did put up a quiz yesterday. It's due Saturday. The quiz covers everything in terms of the introduction to poetry and all the terms, that I said could be on it. Some of the questions are from the terms. And it goes through all the poems that were assigned through today, even though we're not going to get to all of those, okay? I think it's just like, name the author or name the poem that the author wrote, that kind of thing. But that's due Saturday. My Last Duchess, okay, dramatic monologue. What does that mean? What's a monologue? You watch late night TV. I don't. I haven't for years. How does Jimmy Kimmel begin every show? Or Stephen Colbert, or back when, I would watch it, Johnny Carson or something like that, or Jay Leno. They start with their monologue. They get the laughs, and then they start introducing the guests and such. Okay? So this is a dramatic monologue. And that implies somebody is listening to this. That is, we have a speaker and we have a hearer. A lot of people think that, for example, the poem we just read by John Donne can be read as a dramatic monologue. I mean, it's pretty clear. There is somebody listening to that. All right? The difference between Donne's poem and this poem is, in a real dramatic monologue, the person who speaks kind of gets on a roll and reveals some character defect, reveals something about him or herself that they probably don't intend to. Okay? So the question with My Last Duchess is, what does the speaker accidentally reveal about his character? It is a male speaker, all right? And notice, after the title, My Last Duchess, we have that Ferrara with a little note. In the 16th century, the Duke of this Italian city arranged to marry a second time after the mysterious death of his very young first wife. So, a real duke from Ferrara in Italy, 16th century, arranged a second marriage after his young wife mysteriously died. Look at the title. My Last Duchess. What does last imply? Why is it not just my Duchess or my wife? It's my last wife, my last Duchess. It's not my first wife or my first Duchess. Last implies series, more than one. Like My Last Duchess, implication is at least the second one. Okay? I think at least. Maybe it is just, she was my first and only wife. I don't think last implies that, however. So, that's My Last Duchess, painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. I call that piece a wonder now. Frau Pandolf's hands worked busily a day, and there she stands. Frau Pandolf is the imaginary painter, artist, who drew her, who painted her portrait. Will it please you sit and look at her? I said Frau Pandolf by design. So between, will it please you sit and look at her, and he starts talking about Frau Pandolf, they stop for a moment, and they sit to look at this painting. Okay? I said Frau Pandolf by design, for never read strangers like you, that pictured countenance, the depth and passion of its earnest glance. But to myself they turned, since none puts by the curtain I have drawn for you but I, and seemed as they would ask me if they durst, how came such a glance there? So, he's told us, the only reason you can see this portrait is because I've pulled the curtain back to reveal it. Okay? And he says, I mentioned Frau Pandolf by name because others who have seen this portrait have dared to ask, okay, dared, but they don't actually go through with it. That is, they wanted to ask, but they didn't. So I told them, okay? Seemed as they would ask me if they durst, how such a glance came there. That is, the glance on the woman's face. How did the painter get that? And he's attributing it to the excellence of the painter, of the artist. All right? So, he goes on, line 12. So, not the first are you to turn and ask thus. Now, notice within the poem that we see, does the other person say, how did she get that look on her face? No, he doesn't. All we hear is the one speaker. That's why it's a monologue. So it's an implied question. Sir, 'twas not her husband's presence only called that spot of joy into the Duchess's cheek. So what's the spot of joy in her cheek? What does he mean by spot of joy? What can happen, not just a woman's, to anyone's cheek? You can either be your natural normal color, right? Or you can blush, in which case those capillaries open up and you get a little more blood flow in the face. That's what he's talking about. There's a little element of blush in her cheek. And notice what he says. It wasn't my presence only that caused that blush. What does that statement imply? It's not stating this. It implies something. The implication gets stronger the farther and farther into the poem we go. So just leave the question alone for a moment. Perhaps, okay, he's taking a guess. Perhaps Frau Pandolf chanced to say, her mantle laps over my lady's wrist too much. Or, paint must never hope to reproduce the faint half flush that dies along her throat. While she was posing, perhaps Frau Pandolf said, ma'am, lift your sleeve up a little more. Meaning what? I mean, literally, meaning what? If her sleeve covers her wrist, and he says it covers too much, what's that literally mean? Show me more skin. Okay? Back at a time when skin is meant to be covered. At least some skin. All right? Like in the late 19th century, women wore skirts and dresses that went what? Down to their feet. It wasn't appropriate to even show the ankles. And then they get higher and higher. And in the early 1960s, it's like, boom, suddenly you have the mini skirt, which covers less than, anything else. So, or he says, the blush on her throat, paint can never hope to reproduce. He's like, honey, I'm never going to be able to capture your beauty. That's what is meant there. Look what comes after the colon. Such stuff was courtesy, she thought. My wife thought Frau Pandolf was just being courteous. lost my place. Was courtesy, she thought, and cause enough for calling up that spot of joy. In other words, oh, Fred Poundolf, you didn't mean that. And so she blushes. She had a heart, how shall I say, and I know we've only got a minute. How shall I say, too soon made glad, too easily impressed. What does that mean? And we'll stop with this. Too soon made glad, too easily impressed. If you're too soon, too easily made happy, what are you saying about somebody else? You're not discreet. You're not discriminating. You don't weigh joys. Okay? We'll stop there. I can't believe how far behind I am in this class. And we'll pick up there on Friday. More than likely, I got a little bit farther in my first class. More than likely, I'm going to have to do a separate recording to send to you guys to get through the rest of these poems. I'll send an email out about that. I'm probably going to do that for the assignments for Friday. We won't get through this stuff. We'll maybe get through the stuff for the 16th on Friday. All right. Have a good couple days. See you on Friday.